I paid for my brother's entire wedding venue, catering, flowers, the open bar, and they seated me at the back table next to the coat rack. When my new sister-in-law's mother leaned over and said, "You don't mind, do you? You're basically staff." I smiled and said, "Actually, I am. I'm the one who signs the checks." Then I pulled out my phone and canceled the automatic transfer that paid their mortgage. That was the moment everything changed. But to understand why it took me that long, you have to understand what I had been carrying for the last decade. My name is Rachel. I am 32 years old. I am a senior financial analyst at a mid-size investment firm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I have spent the better part of my adult life being the invisible scaffolding holding my family's house upright while everyone else admired the architecture. My older brother Derek is 37. He is charming in the way that people who have never had to try very hard tend to be effortlessly likable, perpetually optimistic, and chronically irresponsible with money. Growing up, Derek was the one who made my mother, Carol, laugh until she cried. He was the one my father, Robert, coached in Little League and drove to every away game. I was the one who stayed home and reorganized the filing cabinet when the property tax bill arrived, and my parents had somehow forgotten it existed. Derek married a woman named Vanessa 11 months ago. Vanessa is the daughter of Diane, a woman who has managed to build an entire personality out of the phrase "our family has standards." Diane drives a leased BMW she can't afford, hosts dinner parties where she name-drops colleges she never attended, and views anyone outside of her immediate social circle as either an asset or an obstacle. From the first time Derek brought Vanessa home, it was clear that Diane viewed me as neither. I was furniture, pleasant enough to have in the room but not worth addressing directly. The engagement happened fast. Derek called me on a Tuesday night, voice buzzing with excitement, and the first words out of his mouth after she said yes were, "And Rach, you have the best eye for venues, you know that." It wasn't a compliment, it was a commission. Within 48 hours, I was on a group text with Carol, Vanessa, and Diane, being asked to research catering packages for 200 guests. I want to be clear about something that took me years of therapy to understand. I did not help because anyone asked nicely. I helped because I had been trained since childhood to believe that my value in this family was transactional. I was not the daughter who was loved. I was the daughter who was useful. Carol never said it out loud. She didn't have to. It was in the way she introduced Derek at parties, my son, the one everyone loves, and introduced me. And this is Rachel. She's very organized. Organized, like a filing system, like a label maker. Not a person, a function. So when Derek got engaged, I did what I always did. I absorbed the task. I spent 4 weekends visiting venues across the greater Charlotte area. I built a spreadsheet color-coded, with cost breakdowns per head, dietary accommodation columns. I negotiated a 15% discount at Meridian Gardens, a restored plantation-style estate on the edge of Lake Norman, by leveraging a relationship I had built through a corporate client event the prior year. The venue alone would have cost $42,000 at full price. I got it for $35,800. I considered that my wedding gift. Then came the catering. Then the florals. Then the DJ, the rehearsal dinner reservation, the wedding night hotel suite, the gift bags for the out-of-town guests. Each ask came through the group text, casual and cheerful, as if they were asking me to pick up milk on the way home. And each time, I said yes. My own savings account watched me the way a patient dog watches its owner pack a suitcase. I never asked to be reimbursed. That was the deal I had made with myself, silent, unilateral, never stated aloud. I would give generously, and eventually, they would see me. They would look at what I had built and they would know that I mattered. 4 days before the wedding, Vanessa texted me the seating chart. I zoomed in on my name. Table 14. I zoomed out to see the room layout. Table 14 was in the rear corner of the reception hall, positioned between the emergency exit and the station where the catering staff would store the clean glassware. It seated 8 people. 6 of the other 7 seats were occupied by names I didn't recognize: Vanessa's college roommate's boyfriend, a distant cousin from her father's side, a coworker who had apparently RSVP'd at the last minute. The 8th seat was empty, labeled reserved, which I would later learn was kept open in case Diane's nail technician decided to attend. I stared at the chart for a long time. Then I typed, "Is there a reason I'm at table 14?" into the group text. Vanessa responded in 4 minutes. "Oh, Rach, we had to seat you separately because Diane's family takes up most of the front tables and we wanted to keep it organized. You understand, right? You're so good at understanding logistics." There it was. "You're so good at understanding logistics. I built the logistics. I am the logistics." And now I would sit beside the coat rack and watch from 200 feet away as my brother married a woman whose mother thought I was staff. I typed, "Of course," and put my phone face down on the counter. That night I called my best friend, Simone. "Tell me I'm overreacting," I said. "You're not overreacting," she said immediately. "You paid for that table. You paid for all the tables. I didn't do it to be recognized." "I know," she said. "That's what makes it worse." I spent the next 3 days completing every task on my wedding coordination list. I confirmed the vendor arrival times. I created a day of timeline document and distributed it to the venue coordinator. I picked up Vanessa's veil from the alterations shop because she had a nail appointment. I did all of it. Because I had started something and I finish what I start. That is perhaps the only thing about myself I have never second-guessed. The wedding day was a Saturday in late September, the kind of day that feels designed for photographs. The air was warm and dry, the light golden and forgiving. Meridian Gardens looked exactly the way I had imagined it when I'd first walked the property 8 months earlier. The ceremony was held under a canopy of white oak trees strung with soft Edison lighting. The florals, dusty rose peonies, and eucalyptus were exactly what I had sourced. The catering staff moved with the quiet precision I had requested in the contract I had drafted. It was a beautiful wedding. I built a beautiful wedding, and I sat at table 14 to watch it. Dinner service started at 7. I was seated between Vanessa's college roommate's boyfriend, who spent the meal with his eyes on his phone, and an empty chair. The coat rack was close enough that I could read the tags on the hanging jackets. I ate my salmon the menu I had selected, and I smiled at anyone who made eye contact, which was almost nobody. Then Diane appeared. She was making rounds. That was the performance, the mother of the bride graciously visiting each table, bestowing her presence like a monarch on a walkabout. She arrived at table 14 in a cloud of jasmine perfume, wearing a blush-colored gown that I recognized as the one she had told Carol she found for almost nothing at a boutique in South Park. I had Googled it. It was $1,100. "Rachel," she said, "the way people say a name when they're surprised to find the object where they left it. You look comfortable back here. It's a beautiful evening." I said, She glanced at the empty chair beside me, then back at me. "You know, we almost didn't have the budget for this section of the room at all, but Derek said we had to include you." She tilted her head, a practiced gesture of sympathy. "It must be nice, being so close to the service area. You probably feel right at home, given how much you've been helping out." She smiled. "You don't mind being back here, do you? You're basically staff at this point." "It's really a compliment." I looked at her. Diane was 61 years old and had never, in the 11 months I had known her, asked me a single question about myself. Not my job, not my apartment, not my life. I was a resource she had accessed through her daughter's marriage, and she had just said, out loud, at the wedding I had funded, that I was staff. "Actually," I said, and my voice was very calm, very level, in the way that water is level right before it reaches the edge of something. I'm the one who signs the checks." Her smile didn't move. She wasn't sure what I meant yet. "Enjoy your evening," I said pleasantly. She drifted away. I picked up my phone and opened my banking app. I navigated to the recurring transfers section. Every month, on the 1st, I sent $400 to Carol and Robert's joint account. It was listed in my transfer history simply as family support. I had set it up 3 years earlier when my father's hours at the plant were cut and their mortgage payment became a point of tension. I had never mentioned it to anyone. It was just something I did. I canceled it. Effective immediately. Then I finished my salmon. It was very good salmon. I had negotiated a better price per head by agreeing to a limited menu. The salmon had been my recommendation. I want to tell you what happened in the weeks that followed, because the story does not end at the reception hall. That moment with Diane was the first domino. What I didn't know, sitting at table 14 with my canceled bank transfer and my untouched champagne, was that the domino run went much further than I had seen. It started 9 days after the wedding, on a Monday morning. My mother called. Carol does not call on weekday mornings. She calls on Sunday evenings to report on what happened in church, neighborhood news, and occasionally what Derek is up to, delivered with the enthusiasm of a press secretary. A Monday morning call meant something had gone sideways. The transfer didn't come through, she said, before even saying hello. I know, I said. I canceled it. Silence. Rachel, that's our mortgage. It's $400 toward your mortgage, I said. What's the full payment? More silence. Then, that's not the point. Mom, I said, I've been sending that transfer for 3 years and you never once acknowledged it. Not once. You never said thank you. You never asked me if I could afford it. You just received it the way you receive the mail. I paused. I sat at table 14. It was a seating chart, she said. Vanessa handled the seating chart. Vanessa handled it because I spent 8 months handling everything else, I said. I would like you to think about what this wedding would have looked like without me. And then I would like you to think about whether a person who built it from nothing deserves to eat dinner next to the coat rack. Carol did not have an answer for that. She shifted, as she always does when confronted with something she doesn't want to examine, into a gentler form of deflection. You know we love you, Rachel. You know Derek loves you. Diane is just, she's a lot. Nobody thinks of you as staff. Diane said it, I said. Out loud, at the table, to my face. Another silence. Then, well, Diane says a lot of things. I realized in that moment what I had known for years, but never allowed myself to fully accept. Carol was not going to defend me. Not because she didn't love me, but because defending me would require her to acknowledge what had been done, and acknowledging it would require her to account for her own role in it. It was easier to describe Diane as a lot and move on. I'll talk to you later, Mom, I said and ended the call. That afternoon, I received a text from Derek. It said, Hey, can you call me? Mom said there's some issue with the transfer. We're still kind of sorting out wedding expenses on our end, so the timing is a little rough, LOL. The lull nearly ended me. I typed back, happy to talk. When are you free? He called that evening. So what's going on? He said. He sounded vaguely puzzled, like a person who has walked into a room and can't remember why. I explained, calmly, that I had canceled the transfer. I explained why. I described the table, the coat rack, what Diane had said. Derek listened in the way that people listen when they are waiting for the part where you explain that it was actually fine. Rach, he said, when I finished. You know Diane. She's like that with everyone. Is she like that with Vanessa? That's different. That's her daughter. I paid $35,000 for her daughter's wedding, Derek. A long pause. I mean, we said thank you. Did you? Another pause. Longer this time. I thought we did. You didn't, I said. Not once. Not a phone call. Not a card. Not a text. I have the receipts. I have 37 emails and 14 vendor invoices and 4 weekends of my life in that spreadsheet. You can check. I wasn't angry when I said it. That surprised me. I had expected to feel furious. What I actually felt was something colder and more final, like pressing a seal into wax. I'm going to make it right, Derek said. I promise. Can you reinstate the transfer for now and we'll talk about everything else? No, I said. And I ended the call. What happened next, I did not anticipate. In the way that you sometimes pull a thread and discover the garment was more loosely assembled than it appeared, the cancellation of $400 exposed something much larger underneath. 3 days later, I received an email from Meridian Gardens. It was addressed to me because I was the signatory on the venue contract. The subject line read, Outstanding Balance Final Notice. I opened it. The wedding had included an overtime clause. If the reception ran past 11 p.m., there was an additional fee of $2,000 per hour billed to the contract holder. The reception had run until 12:40. The outstanding balance was $3,600. Due within 15 days. No one had told me. I called the venue coordinator, a woman named Patricia, who had been professional and communicative throughout the entire planning process. She told me that Derek and Vanessa had been notified of the overage at checkout and had indicated that the account holder would take care of it. The account holder was me. I thanked Patricia, ended the call, and sat with that information for approximately 4 minutes. Then I opened my laptop and I started pulling files. I had kept everything, every email, every invoice, every transfer confirmation, every receipt. I had them organized in a cloud folder labeled Derek Wedding with subfolders by vendor category. This is the part where being very organized, the trait my mother introduced me by at parties, turned out to be a genuine asset. The total came to $41,214. That was what I had spent. That was what I had given, in addition to the 3 years of monthly transfers to my parents, which totaled $14,400. Combined, $55,614. Given quietly, without condition, without acknowledgement, and without so much as a seat at the table. I contacted a financial attorney. Her name was Monica. She was recommended by a colleague and she charged $400 an hour, and she was worth every cent. I showed her the documentation. I asked her what my options were. Monica told me that gifts, given without documented expectation of repayment, were generally unrecoverable. But the overtime charge, that was something else. That was a liability I had incurred without consent. You were named as guarantor on the contract, she said. They used that without authorization to extend the event and left you with the bill. That's recoverable. And depending on how it was communicated to the venue, it could be more than that. I asked her to draft a formal demand letter. Derek and Vanessa. $3,600. 30 days to pay. The letter arrived on a Thursday. Derek called me 17 minutes later. "What is this?" he said. He was not puzzled this time. He was rattled. "It's a demand letter," I said, "for the overtime charge I incurred at the venue because you extended the reception without telling me. We thought it was covered. It wasn't. I checked the contract with you on 2 separate occasions. The overtime clause was highlighted. Rachel, this is insane. We just got married. We don't have that kind of cash right now." "I know," I said. "I've been helping cover your shortfalls for a decade." Silence. "I would like to tell you something, Derek," I said, "and I want you to hear me before you respond. I had practiced this, not because I was performing, because I knew that if I didn't have the words ready, I would lose them. I love you. I have always loved you. But I have spent my entire adult life making myself smaller and more useful so that this family would make room for me. I organized your wedding because I thought that if I did it beautifully enough, you would finally look at me the way you look at people who matter to you. And on the night of your wedding, after everything I gave, I ate dinner next to a coat rack while your mother-in-law told me I was staff. My voice stayed steady. I was proud of that. I'm not doing it anymore. The transfer is canceled. The letter stands. And I need you to talk to Vanessa and Diane and figure out how to pay what you owe." Another silence. Then Derek said quietly, "I didn't know, Rach. About the table. Vanessa didn't tell me." "She didn't have to tell you," I said. "You should have looked." I let that sit. Then I ended the call. The demand letter created a pressure that expanded outward like heat. Within a week, Vanessa had called Carol. Carol had called Robert. Robert had called me to deliver, on behalf of everyone, the message that I was tearing the family apart over money. I told my father that the family had been taking money from me for years, and I was simply declining to continue. He told me I was being dramatic. I told him I would send him a spreadsheet and ended the call. Diane, predictably, went a different direction. She texted me directly. I did not know she had my number until this moment. The text said, "Rachel, I don't know what Derek has told you, but I want to be clear that my comment at the reception was meant as a compliment. You have such a gift for organizing things. I hope you won't let a misunderstanding damage what is supposed to be a joyful time for our families." I read it twice. Then I screenshot it, saved it to the Derek Wedding folder, and did not respond. 3 days before the 30-day deadline on the demand letter, Vanessa called me herself. This was the call I had not expected. And it was the one that changed everything, not because of what Vanessa said, but because of what she told me by accident. "Rachel," she said, and she sounded tired. The way people sound when they've been arguing inside a house for days. "I want to resolve this. I do, but you have to understand we are genuinely stretched. The wedding cost more than we planned." "I know exactly what it cost," I said. "Derek has been trying to cover some things, and it's just there's been some back and forth with the vendor payments. And I honestly thought your parents were handling the overflow." I went very still. "What do you mean, my parents were handling the overflow?" A pause. "Derek said Carol and Robert had offered to cover the bar tab and the rehearsal dinner since you were doing so much of the other stuff." I assumed they had. I pulled up my records. I had paid the bar tab. I had paid the rehearsal dinner deposit. I had the receipts. Vanessa, I said carefully, I paid those. Both of them. Another pause. Oh. Her voice shifted something and it recalibrated. Derek told me his parents were covering those. He told you that? Yes. I understood then what had happened. Derek had told Vanessa that Carol and Robert were contributing, so that the ledger looked balanced, so that my contribution appeared to be one share among several, rather than the entire foundation. It was not a small lie. It was a structural one. It had allowed everyone, including Vanessa, to feel comfortable accepting without examining too closely what I was actually carrying. Vanessa, I said, I am going to email you a complete accounting of what I paid for your wedding. Every line item. I am not sending it to be vindictive. I am sending it because you deserve to know the truth about what happened. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, okay. I sent the spreadsheet within the hour. $41,214, broken into categories, with dates and vendor confirmations attached. Vanessa called back 22 minutes later. I could hear from her voice that she had been crying. I didn't know, she said. Rachel, I swear I didn't know any of this. I thought Derek said you offered. He said you wanted to do it. He said it was your gift to us. I did want to help, I said, but I also expected to be treated like a person who mattered, not a vendor. She was quiet again. Then, my mother was awful to you. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't hear what she said at the table. If I had, she stopped. It doesn't matter. I should have known where you were seated. I should have looked. That was the second time someone had said that to me in 2 weeks. I should have looked. I'm not asking you to do anything about the past, I said. What I'm asking is that you and Derek pay the $3,600 you owe, and that going forward, we are honest with each other. We'll pay it, she said immediately. This week, I'm so sorry. The check arrived in 4 days. Vanessa's handwriting on the memo line. Thank you, Rachel, I mean that. What came after was quieter than I expected. There was no dramatic confrontation at a family gathering. There was no public moment of reckoning. The reckoning happened in smaller rooms, in the spaces between phone calls, in the way people began to adjust their behavior when they understood that the arrangement had changed permanently. Derek and I had a long, difficult conversation 2 weeks after the check cleared. He sat across from me at a coffee shop in uptown Charlotte, and he did something I had not seen him do since we were children. He was honest without performing. He said he had known, somewhere underneath the buoyancy of his personality, that I was carrying more than my share. He said it had been easier not to examine it because examining it required him to do something uncomfortable, which was admit that he had let it happen. He said he was sorry. Not in the way people say sorry when they want to close a conversation, in the way they say it when they understand the weight of what they are apologizing for. I told him I accepted his apology. I told him it did not mean everything was resolved immediately. I told him that what I needed from him going forward was simple. See me. Not what I can do, not what I can organize or pay for or fix. Just see me. He looked at me across the coffee shop table, my older brother, charming and flawed and 37 years old, and he said, I see you, Rach. I didn't cry. I had cried enough, alone in my apartment, over years of smaller moments that had accumulated into this one. What I felt instead was something clean and uncluttered, like a room after everything unnecessary has been taken out of it. Carol came around more slowly, as mothers do when what they must confront implicates them. It took 3 months and one very long Sunday phone call, during which I said things I had never said, and she listened in the way that people listen when they are finally ready to hear. She told me she had always been proud of me. I told her I had needed her to say that out loud for a very long time. She cried. I let her. Robert said almost nothing, as Robert tends to do, but he started calling me on weekday evenings, just short calls, to ask about work, to tell me something funny that had happened at the hardware store, where he now works part-time. It was small. It was real. Diane I did not forgive. Forgiving Diane was not something I owed anyone, including Diane. She sent a card at Christmas with a generic sentiment and her signature. I filed it. I did not respond. We were civil at Thanksgiving, seated at the same table, which was a long rectangular table with enough seats for everyone, and no coat rack in sight. I noticed that. I sat where I wanted. I still live alone in my apartment in Charlotte. I still work in finance. My savings account is recovering. I took a weekend trip to Asheville with Simone in the spring, something I had deferred for 2 years, because there was always something family-related that needed the money more. Simone and I stayed in a small inn on the river and drank wine on the porch, and I did not check my phone once. On the last evening before we drove home, she asked me what it felt like now. After everything, I thought about it for a while before answering, which is unusual for me. I am normally quick with an answer. It feels like I finally understand the difference, I said. Between what? Between being loved and being used, I said. I spent so long confusing them because in my family they looked the same from the outside. They both required me to give constantly. The difference is that love eventually gives something back. I looked at the river, which was catching the last of the evening light. I was waiting to earn my seat at the table. I thought if I just gave enough, eventually they would save me a place. I paused. What I finally figured out is that I was allowed to just sit down. Simone raised her glass. I raised mine. The wine was very good. I had picked it.